Okay, so I'm going to put together a little video here about how to put these spool holders together, how they work, the particulars or whatever. So first what you see here is basically you have 3 bearings, skateboard bearings, and you have 2 spools, an inner and outer. Then you have a trim ring that holds the bearing in, and then you have 1 or 2 nuts depending on how you want to do it. So basically, if your spool is going to unroll counterclockwise, then you need to have the second lock nut on here. And what that'll do is that'll prevent this one from unwinding. However, if you are pulling clockwise to your machine, you really only need 1 nut, and that's going to be important on if you own the Plus, and we'll get to that in here in a second. So the parts you have here are, now you have the option of using this on a magnetic like I have, or on the OEM bracket. If you use it on the OEM bracket, you're going to have 2 parts. You're going to have this part and this part, and what they do is they interlock right here, and this is not sized properly. The lip is too big, but the one you get has already been adjusted. But basically you will stick this right here, and you will put that right there, and then this will smush. And the way that'll smush is, now I say now a lot. Let's back up here. So these are your lag bolts that we're using. It would be nice for a hex head, but a lot of the ones that you find with hex heads are not threaded all the way down. They'll just be threaded on the end. So if you're using the OEM version, not that big of an issue. Kind of fits in. You can just hold this, tighten it down, and if you look, you'll see we're using a nylon nut with a nylon stop in it. If you are using it on the OEM mount, you will just put together these 2 pieces, and then you will go ahead and put a nut right here. Or you don't necessarily have to put a nut here like I have on this one. Well, you can do it more like I have on this one, where you see I just have a piece. This is a practice one. Your lip will not be as big, but you can see you can just go ahead and put your spool. So I don't have a spool here with 2 bearings, but basically the inner spool has a bearing on this side and this side. So if you're doing the OEM version, you can just slide it on with your other bearing right here, and then put your nut on, and then that'll sandwich it all together. Another thing about assembling these is the more you tighten this nut down, the more resistance there's going to be in this wheel. A little resistance in this wheel is probably not bad to prevent, if the machine pulls on it real quick, you don't want it to keep unspooling the filament. So yeah, basically like this, and then you put your nut, your bearing in your nut. So there'll be a carve out on the inner for the bearing to recess down inside it, and then you put your nut. So there you go, that's your permanent part. And then basically you'll have this, and there is a cover. I'll give you this one right here. This video is coming down off track here. What do you want for a Monday morning video? Alright, so you see, here you go, and there's a bearing in there, and this cap just glues on there to kind of hold the bearing in. So you're just going to put your spool on, and this is a first generation spool that doesn't fit worth the crap. Let's just move to this one. So you'll see we fit right there, and we pop our top cover on, and then okay, now if you look, some of the nuts, there's 2 different kinds of cap. There's a cap with a lip, and then there's a cap without the lip. and that's the way they're identified inside the folder. But this one right here, you want to have the lip go down. The lip will go down in here and push on the bearing. And there you go. And you'll see that if you don't get your bearing on there straight, and there you go. And it works pretty well. It's awesome. I love them. I have about 5 of these on my metal cabinets. Okay, now let's back up here. So, like I said, you could do, it's a little harder when the other end's not mounted. And just tighten up slow and wiggle a little bit when you do your last little bit, and it'll stay centered. Like I said, if you're pulling counterclockwise, this is where you're going to want to put your lock nut on, and we would just put a lock nut on like this. This one doesn't have a nut in it. Okay, so that's just the particulars of how to assemble it. Now, there's a couple more things to consider here. One is how to print this stuff, and it's really going to matter on these. So we know that on this, we want the lip so we can go down inside of our trim ring. So when we print this, we are going to want to print this open side down, because the bottom side is going to be the ugly side a little bit where it touches the raft. And we'll give you some hints about how to print these here in a second. Now, I hate printing them like this because it makes it hard. You have to use some really good supports for the rest of this. There has to be good density. Well, that makes it a big pain to get everything out of inside here. And you can see it can get torn up. We'll show you some tricks for that. And so you have to think about how they're going to sit when you print them. Now, so this is the other style cap. So we have this with this cap. And on this one, we'll print this one face up, the opposite of the other one. I think it's the best because you don't have to get the supports out of the inside, and the trim ring really makes it look like the seam being exposed doesn't bother it one bit. And there you go, and then there will be your retainer. So we'll just put this all down here like this, and then your retainer will screw on here like that, and there you go. And that's a beauty. Now, a couple things to consider. This one requires a shorter lag. So this lag bolt right here for the one on the plus is 5 inches. The regular lag that we use everywhere else is 6.5 inches. So a 6 or a 6.5 inch. So the 6.5 inch will not fit here. I thought about adjusting this back and making this recess back the extra 1/2 inch to make it so it, here's why it's a problem. With the shorter screw, you're only allowed to get one trim nut on here, right? You're only allowed to get the one nut because you're losing 1/2 inch off the screw, and that makes it so that the second nut, which becomes a problem if you're winding this counterclockwise. They can't unwind. So, the best thing to do on the plus for now is to make sure that your spool is feeding clockwise so that any pressure on the nut would be to tighten it. So to do that, if we're going to do it here, we just move this extruder over, and we do the same thing over here. It's a dual extrusion on a machine, and we can do that on this machine. Possibly, like I said, I'll redo that bracket. So I think that covers most of this. We're going to go ahead and move over to the slicer here. Okay, we'll just go over some of the slicer settings here. I'm printing these nuts. Important to get them to come out pretty. So like I said, depending on how you want it orientated, when you're finished will determine what side you want down. So on these bigger ones, the 5/16 ones, I like 0.12 layer height. You could probably go to a, if you really wanted to go to 0.2 you could, but the higher you go, the less, yeah, the more definition you're going to lose, the worse the print's going to look. So on your initial layer width, if you're in the habit of bumping up your first layer width and first layer flow, you're not going to want to do that on top of a raft. So I'm going to lower it to 105. So on our shell's not going to matter because we're going to want to go 100% on these. So 100% infill. The temperature is going to be critical on these, not just the nozzle but the bed. So right here on these little balls, they're going to be very thin, have very thin edges, and they're going to be overhanging, and they're going to want to curl. So to prevent that curl, you're going to want to make sure that you don't have your bed too hot, that you have your filament temperature as low as you can go, safely go, and you have sufficient fan, to moderate fan probably. But so this is eSun PLA Plus. 205 is usually the lower end, what you can get away with printing. Of course, that's going to slightly vary between machines. Build plate temperature, if you're used to 60, you might want to go to 50, 55. We're not going to do an higher initial first layer temperature since we're printing on a raft, probably not as important. Our initial layer flow, again, this is another one we don't want to bump up too much. 105 is where I have it. Your print speed, probably 30, 35. Go down here on your fan. Probably this is going to depend on your ambient and a lot of other things, but I'm thinking a good starting point for this print is going to be 50. So your supports, we're going to start a raft, so this obviously is going to need a raft. So we're going to set a raft. We're also going to turn up the raft print speed right here because it's set really low in Cura, so we're going to bump it up way high. You don't need a pretty raft. Then we're going to move on to supports. So you want supports everywhere, and you want the support angle, I keep it low, about 45. I want as much support down here as I can get on this curved section. And then I also want high support density, so my supports are not far apart. I want them close together. So this is the area that's going to have support in it, that's going to be a big pain in the butt. So I have a couple things I like to use for removing supports. One thing is I have these mini pliers, and I don't know where they came from, but one side is rounded and one side is squared, but the rounded side is really nice for getting inside without damaging stuff. So what I like to do is I like to get in here, and then we're just going to turn it, and we'll grab it here, turn it. Basically the crushing action tends to bust the supports free a lot, but just a crush, twist, and you can pop this out, and just try not to mess up this little lip. Seems like there was one more thing that I wanted to put in this video. Oh, there is. I know what it is right here. Let's find our pulley. Yeah, over here, our spool. So this is the outer one. So pretty much all this stuff is straightforward to print. One little thing on this right here is up inside here. This is rounded up in here. So when you print this face down, we'll set this to 85% angle on the support, and what that'll do is that'll prevent support from clogging up in here, which you don't need, and you'll just have a support right here. So that should just about cover everything. Anybody have any questions, hit us up at Brett Wares Everything Creality, and we'll see what we can do about answering any questions. All right, good luck.